a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters the inner shrine behind the curtain, where Jesus, a forerunner on our behalf, has entered, having become a high priest forever according to the order of the Melchizedek.
Yep.
This Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, met Abraham as he was returning from defeating the kings and blessed him. And to him Abraham apportioned 1/10 of everything. His name, in the first place, means King of Righteousness. Next, he is also the King of Salem, that is, King of Peace. Without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. See how great he is. Even Abraham the patriarch gave him 1/10 of the spoils. And those descendants of Levi who receive the priestly office have a commandment in the law to collect tithes from people, that is, from their kindred, though these are also descended from Abraham. But this man, who does not belong to their ancestry, collected tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had received the promises. Let mutual affection continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that some have entertained angels without knowing it. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
So Barbara Brown Taylor, there's a picture of her. Here she is, lovely woman. She's Episcopal priest, retired world religions professor from Piedmont College. She tells the story of this student she had in her Religion 101 class who decided to become a Jew by the end of the class. She's an Episcopal priest, like I said. Anyone who has tried to become Jewish knows that it doesn't work the way it does for us as Christians. This is not the same. Judaism actively kind of discourages converts. It's not something they ask for. Since a person doesn't actually need to be Jewish in order to be righteous in God's eyes. There's a lot of reasons why conversion is not really a part of Judaism, though they do have a process for it. And so think, why take all these extra requirements on, all these extra responsibilities of faith on, if they generally think you are fine as you are by their theology? The student, though, persisted. She was so compelled by the presentation of Judaism that she says, I am going to convert by the end of this class. And so when the rabbi eventually calls her name and places the large Torah scrolls in her arms, Professor Taylor was invited to this moment, and she's welcomed into the congregation, Children of Israel. And Barbara Brown Taylor says she couldn't be, for the most part, anything but happy for her. It was a beautiful moment. But then she was a little bit grumpy about it. Couldn't be anything but, could be a little bit something other than happy. And she said she was grumpy, and it was this weird kind of grumpiness. Happy and grumpy, not because her student had become a Jew, but because it was possible that her Religion 101 class had played a part in that decision, and that was not in the course plan anywhere. And Taylor was focused on teaching the basics of the 5 major world religions in this class, not helping students decide which one would be right for them, right? Yet that was clearly what a number of them were doing. Another student decided to be baptized for the first time after a class discussion on the difference between infant baptism and believer's baptism. Not part of the syllabus. Another got a tattoo of a yin and yang symbol on her forearm during the unit on Chinese traditions. And when she showed it to Taylor after class one day, she asked if Taylor could steer her toward the nearest Taoist church. That was my intention. And so these students were kind of the exception, she says, but they reminded Professor Taylor that there is more than one way to respond to religious pluralism, especially in an area with the fullest display, with a buffet of options we have here, right? Like the DC metro area. Perhaps as a part of the Christian majority, you were raised as I was, to ignore the truth claims of other religions entirely. There was actually a scripture that would be quoted, and I'm not sure if this is specifically evangelical world, but the scripture would often be quoted, oh, you look into that, you've got itching ears. You don't want to have those itching ears. No, it sounds weird. I don't know. Maybe get a Q-tip. I don't know. Thinking like your ears, you're opening yourself up to hearing something that then could scratch an itch that you didn't know you had, some sinful itch underneath that could make you vulnerable and you could lose your faith. It's hard to ignore, though, that countless other people are strongly affected and moved and find meaning in what they learn and how they grow through the practice of other religions. Some, like Professor Taylor's student, make conscious decisions to convert, either to another world faith or maybe like many of you have. A little bit of conversions happened in this space too, from one branch of the Christianity tree to another one as you've evolved over time. And so what do we make of this? Like, how do we make sense and navigate this world? This world we're on college campuses, spiritual but not religious, that option on any questionnaire. Off the charts among Gen Z, where the majority of Gen Z say they're spiritually open to multiple religious traditions, not just one. Among Christians, this spiritual but not religious category and its growth and popularity over the last couple of decades, it's kind of been, especially I would say, in the theological world, it's been kind of described as like shallow, self-serving, kind of socially disengaged, that category. It's like you want your cake and you want to eat it too. But based on the Gen Zs that I know, it seems to be more to that than what it seems. It seems to be kind of this easier default option chosen. Like there's not the right box on the check sheet, and so it's the best one I can find up there. It's the box checked when you're trying to reconcile the teachings of your faith, the faith you inherited, with the affection for your friends. In a pluralistic society, your friends that were not raised in the same religion as you. And I think that's an honorable thing. I don't know how to do that. I don't know what to call myself. According to the teachings they have received in church, their friends are not all right the way they are. Unless they become Christian, so what I think I learned from my church, that they're not all right until they become Christian, and God will not allow them to enter heaven unless they do. And so does that mean then that my friends of other faiths are going to hell? Is there a hell? Is that for all eternity? For refusing to accept Jesus as Lord? So that's a lot to process in your head as like a 19-year-old, and so you check spiritual but not religious. And this does not make any more sense to some young people, this kind of world of like, my friends might be going to hell because they don't believe the same thing as me. This doesn't make any more sense to these Gen Zs than the teachings between like the account of creation that the Bible has, and then the one I was taught in biology, and I don't know what to do with those two things. And so I think they just default spiritual, but not religious. And these are only a few of the serious questions like Gen Zs have had, right? And the reality is that in most settings, no one in churches are wanting to, or I think more so, don't know how to talk about these questions. This Gen Z generation wants more from their communities of faith than that. Other previous generations, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, you could satisfy them with just a little bit more relevant music, right? little bit more engaging programs, an environment where I can wear jeans, right? But this new generation, they're just not satisfied by those things. They want a place that can answer those questions. And so, of course, they stop doodling in class all of a sudden when they discover a new age of religion offered to them that does not require belief in God or one whose followers believe God is equally present to those of all faiths. I mean, their ears like perk up. Of course, the idea that karma is enticing as it seeks to explain the apparent injustice in the universe, along with the idea that right action might be more important to God than what I believe. And so these teachings would like catch all of our attention if we were that age right now, if we were learning them today. They're unimagined ways of viewing the relationship between like humans and God, and once encountered, like we can't let them go. Like we like the answers to those questions. And so, but then we're here. We're here, gathering body of Christians. Like, what am I to do? What are you to do? People who call yourselves Christians. What are you to do? What am I to do as like a religious leader of a particular community with a particular set of Christian beliefs? What am I to do? How am I to respond? How are you to respond to a multiplicity of religions and spiritual avenues available? So you asked for it. One of you asked the honest question: what happens if I really don't feel like Christianity fits me? And this person, I know who they were. It wasn't anonymous. They come to church all the time. They choose to be here all the time. And they're asking, I'm coming all the time, but what if I don't even feel like it fits me? That is honesty. What if I'd like to remain open to the teachings of other traditions? Is there room for me here? Well, obviously there is. Let me say that. You've been coming all this time, right? But maybe you're like, I remember if I said it, there wouldn't be room for me. Is it even possible to patch together a bunch of things? Like, is there a faithful way to respond to other faith traditions? And so I think there are a couple options we have, right? We have a couple options. When presented with a faith that is enticing to us, that seems to be something that perks our ears, doesn't have to be itching ears, just makes us curious, what are we to do? When we kind of fall in love with something, or we seem to love something about another tradition. Well, you could do one thing. You could convert to that religion. You could. The person who asked this question, who said, hey, I don't really feel like this fits, like you could have a long time ago converted, right? Like you could have gone anywhere else, but you didn't. You could convert. That's an option. You could make a quilt. What I mean by that is like piece together a lot of little scraps here and there of various spiritual bits and pieces with not really any real center to them, but just like, I like that and I like that. I'm gonna take a little bit of that. Or, I think there's a third way. I think this would be the faithful way, or the way that I'm gonna present to you today. You could let your attraction to other religions teach you and transform your love of your own. Does that make sense? Well, it will, maybe, hopefully, by the end. And there's a phrase that kind of comes with this. When you see something you want, it's in the 10 Commandments. What happens when we want something and want to take it for our own? What do we call this? Coveting, right? So envy, right? We envy this religion's thing that ours doesn't have, right? But envy alone might not take you down good paths. But we have this term in this world called a holy envy. Holy envy. And so we're going to kind of define holy envy today. When the Jewish Sabbath came up in a class when I was growing up, I liked it, right? Like that's the Jewish Sabbath is really cool. And I wanted it. Like, why did other Christians let it go? Why do we do so many things on our Sabbath? Oh gosh, I'm envious of that. My spiritual envy extended to the inclusiveness of Hinduism, the nonviolence of Buddhism, right? The prayer life of Islam. Gosh, what discipline. The sacred debate, the wrestling of Judaism. Like all those things I can admire, I can kind of envy. Of course, this is just a simplistic list, idealistic, kind of overgeneralized, and full of my own projections, right? It tells you as much about like what I find wanting in my own tradition, right? As it does about what I find desirable in another one. This gets to the heart of the problem. With plain old envy, with just regular old envy, my own tradition always comes up wanting. This happens a lot in the Christian space between where you came from and where you are now, right? We are from so many traditions. Oftentimes real scars were left, real wounds were left, and you can tell the difference between a person who shows up with their wounds bleeding and the one who's had some healed scars from it. And I think the wounds left to bleed often stems from us plain old envy for all the other Christians who didn't have all this guilt. Leaves me wanting, constantly wanting and critiquing where I came from and can't find the good in it. And so it bleeds, it bleeds. Some of the healing comes from, I know for me, some of the healing comes from recognizing the good in it, right? Finding what did that add to my life in the process. So yeah, we don't want that. The phrase holy envy is this phrase that kind of was brought up by this one theologian, Stendhal, and he was at Yale Divinity School back in the day. And Stendhal, he's a Scandinavian man who taught religious studies, but then he also eventually became a bishop, like a Lutheran bishop, in back home in the 80s in Stockholm. And so around 1985, this is how this word came up for him. Around 1985, there was this Mormon temple opening that summer in his hometown of Stockholm. And he was kind of diffusing the situation, proposing, like, here's how we don't have to feel crazy about this. We don't have to lose our stuff over this. Like, we can be civilized people. And so he proposed kind of 3 ways to remain open to this option in this highly Lutheran city of Stockholm to a Mormon temple being erected right in the middle of it. He said, when trying to understand another religion, number 1, when trying to understand another religion, you should ask the adherents of that religion and not its enemies about it. Okay. Number 2, don't compare your best with their worst, right? Don't compare your best with their worst. And then he didn't know how to describe the last thing. He was like, I don't know. There needs to leave room for some kind of quality. And he called it holy envy. Leave room for holy envy between you. No one is really certain what he meant by it, but he soon started to act it out in ways that required holy courage in his community. As a Lutheran, he found much to envy in the Mormon practice of one belief, vicarious baptism, for instance, by which a living Latter-day Saint chooses to be baptized on behalf of a person who has died without completing this requirement for entering God's kingdom. And so since Lutherans have historically shielded away from Catholic teachings about, the living, how the living might benefit from the dead and all that kind of stuff, they were against that. Stendhal saw something lacking in his own tradition, and was really kind of enamored by this idea of vicarious baptism in his own tradition. And so he saw value in it. He proceeded to envy it from across the fence. Oh, I like that thing. And his decision to stand with the Mormon minority in Stockholm was about more than his interest in the afterlife, though. It was, he said in an interview, in the eyes of God, we are all minorities, right? It's a rude awakening for us as Christians who have never come to grips with the pluralism of our world. And so this holy envy needed to kind of be formed in him. From a limited perspective in a small college classroom, I believe that this increasing amount of young Christians that are coming to grips with pluralism, embracing it even, they're doing it because they're getting very little help from elders who are helping them think through what it means to be a person of faith in a community of people with other faiths. No preacher has ever suggested to them, ever possibly whispered in their itching ears, suggested to them that maybe the good Samaritan might just be the good Muslim or the good humanist, right? Blow their mind. No confirmation teacher has ever taught them that the golden rule includes honoring the neighbor's religion as they would have the neighbor honor theirs. Oh, I hadn't thought about that part of it. Nobody has ever taught them of the story of Melchizedek. Good try. I mean, I can't get it half the time either, so you're good. Nobody's ever told them the story of Melchizedek or told them about Ruth and Boaz. No one's ever told them that the Magi were from different places. We're not God's faithful. Nobody ever told them that perhaps offering hospitality, not just setting out food for them, that's not what they mean here. Offering a hospitality of heart, an openness of spirit, kindling some holy envy, is what the writer of Hebrews said is equivalent to communing with angels. They don't know, so they check the box. They don't know. Nobody's told them these things. There's an old story that was told about an 18th century mystic in the Islam tradition who was seen running through the streets, and in one hand carrying a torch, and in the other hand carrying a bucket of water. And when someone asked her what she was doing, she said, "I wanted to burn down the rewards of paradise with this torch and put out the fires of hell with this water, because both contributed to blocking the way toward God for me. Oh Allah," she prayed, "if I worship you for fear of hell, burn me in hell. And if I worship you in hope of paradise one day, exclude me from paradise then. But if I worship you for your own sake, grudge me not your everlasting beauty." I'm now envious of that. In Christian tradition, this comes under the heading kind of unconditional love, though it is usually understood as like the kind of love God exercises towards humans instead of the other way around, right? Thanks to this Muslim mystic from Iraq, I have this new understanding now, this new way of understanding what it means to love God unconditionally. It better not be so I want to get to heaven, right? Whenever I am tempted to act from fear of divine punishment or hope of divine reward, Rabia leans over kind of and reminds me of the torch and the bucket of water, right? And so and this is what I believe holy envy is kind of meant to do for us. There are ways to do this wrong, though. There are ways for holy envy to go wrong, and so I'm going to give you a couple of those first before we talk about what it looks like. There's one way to do it that looks more like a form of spiritual shoplifting. You have maybe a vision of it in your mind. It starts by like helping yourself to things you might like of another tradition. Tibetan singing bowls, Hindu deities, necklaces strung with Zuni fetishes, Muslim prayer rugs. I'm gonna start collecting things. It's like shoplifting from this other tradition, something that does not hold nearly enough meaning for me. And you pay handsomely for these things too, right? But I've known people who have, in your travels, you bring them home. And if in your travels you do it as a form of honoring the community, they maybe sell things in markets and you want to contribute to their livelihood there. There's all kinds of good ways to do it. But I've also known just, professors or other Christians who just kind of shoplift the traditions of others and display them around their homes as a sense that I've got this pluralism thing down. The desire to possess them stems from kind of this genuine wish to draw closer to their original owners. But when you survey the objects on the windowsill, right? A 19th century spice bowl, and a splendid wooden Buddha, a rare set of Muslim prayer books, right? You feel more than a little colonialist displaying it. It's not that it lacks respect for the objects, but it's that you've separated it from their religious roots for display purposes, right? Like we justify an ongoing possession of them some people will have them for teaching purposes, for storytelling purposes. There's lots of good reasons, but I still remember like being in a class one time where my professor was Christian and she was going to teach us about some various traditions in like a very generalized way, and out of her backpack just fell out a Quran and a menorah and a Shiva, like just kind of like tumbled out of the backpack. And it's nice that you have those, but I would not have thought twice to just kind of stuff in a backpack and let tumble out a Bible, right? It's something about not knowing how to hold it. It's lost its closeness to faith. A Bible is not a Quran. It was not a mistake to assume that a Muslim's attitude we can't assume that a Muslim's attitude towards their holy book was the same as our attitude towards ours. There's a lot of assumptions we start to make. So that's one way to do it wrong. We may look, right? We can admire, but like poaching is really, there's an inauthenticity to it. Another way that I've seen it done kind of is alerts me to other religions that have become neglected in my own, though they go by different names. Like Buddhist meditation is not the same as Christian meditation, right? But assuming that it is, and assuming it as such. Like my envy of the discipline required for like Muslim meditation increases my desire to put more effort into my own prayer meditation. That's holy envy. A Muslim goes to Mecca for different reasons than I go to Bethlehem and Canterbury, right? But my envy causes me to wonder why I need to make pilgrimage and start to, what do Muslims know about the power of community that has all but withered in my neglect? Surely this is what holy envy must be. But don't compare your best to their worst, and instead compare your best to their best, and so that becomes, it gets really messy in that. Instead, how might you consider journeying, maybe not a physical journey like they do, but what would a journey what would your wilderness look like, right? There are ways to do this that aren't trying to mimic. Another troubling form of holy envy, I think, that keeps me up at night is also this sense, it leads me farther away from home than I actually wanted to go. Like if I envy something in another tradition that is so foreign to my own, this is, I think, the worst one, and the one that I think we have to wrestle with is it takes us so far from what we actually believe in our faith that we actually make room for it to completely contradict what we say we believe. So this is what happens when I encounter the Buddhist teaching that human beings are responsible for their own destiny, with no divine mediator at all to erase our mistakes or offer us a free pass to salvation. Our words and actions have natural consequences, which affect everyone around us. Some lead to joy and some lead to sorrow, but no one else can handle them for us. They are ours to handle. That's the Buddhist belief. They're ours to handle, to learn from, as best as we are able. When Buddha himself lay dying, he said this: "Be lamps unto yourselves. Rely on yourselves and do not rely on external help. Hold fast to the truth as a lamp." And it's so close to something Jesus once said to his disciples, right? So close. "You are the light of the world," Jesus said. That it's so enticing. But I did not find anything in my tradition that came close to the Buddhist view of human ability and responsibility. In the Christian view, human beings are incapable of saving ourselves from our sins, right? Our only hope is to accept the miraculous intervention of God's only Son, who can take away the consequences of our actions if we let him, our mediator, our advocate. And so it can be easy then to say, oh yeah, well, I can believe both of those. No, you really can't. You cannot believe both of those. You got to kind of choose one. So when we get into this place where it becomes a patchwork, I gave you some options. You could convert. You could create a patchwork, but what's your center in the end? And do the patchwork that you have, does it conflict one another? Does it conflict one another so much so that your own faith starts making less sense to you? It doesn't help to bring goodness and light and love to your faith. It ends up kind of breaking it down a bit as the band comes forward. So holy envy is not a prerequisite in exploring answers to all these questions, but it's the path forward, I think. There are beautiful things that overlap between traditions. Beautiful, holy things we can hold together, things we can love together, things we can honor together. There are so many goods, service being among the sense of doing good in the world. We kind of all agree on that. A sense of something bigger than ourselves. We kind of all agree on that. And in standing in that space of holy envy, it's this beautiful space, but we also have to be leery of the others. Remember, holy envy is remembering that this thing should be a window into this other faith, these other people, this other tradition should be a window into a transformation of our love for our own faith. How might it transform our faith?